Everybody, welcome back. Saturday morning. It's pretty early. I'm in the shop by myself this morning here. Gonna get plugging away on the Shadow again today. Tom's not coming in today, so we're not gonna be working on his bike at all. He's had to make a run up north and pick up a new car. So I'm planning on starting to pick away at the wiring. A lot of people seem to have lots of questions about wiring, so I'm going to do my best to explain in real intricate detail what I'm doing. I find wiring to be relatively simple. It can be time consuming, can be a little tricky sometimes to keep everything in your head, and the most important thing I find with it is really getting your plan laid out so that as you start you can have enough wires in your loom as you're bringing stuff onto the bike. So for example, if you have in the front of the bike a headlight, a horn, and turn signals, you want to make sure that your main wires that you run up there is enough wires for all those things. That way you're not running 3 and 4 little harnesses all separately. Just makes for a cleaner look. It doesn't affect the function. You could do it like that. You could run them all individually and it would still work fine. But that's just how I like to do it. So I've started a little bit in a couple of the previous episodes doing a little bit of the sub wiring harnesses just from the front. Basically, we have our USB charge port run, our headlight wires, and our coil wires run from the front of the bike down the backbone into the seat area. The vast majority of our wiring on this bike is going to terminate under the tail section. We've got a couple of different things, extra things than you would need like on a traditional bobber. On this bike we got the 1-gauge system, we got a relay board that has the relay we're going to use to trigger our on-off switch and power the rest of the bike. So there's that. What else is underneath there? We got a USB outlet that's got to get mounted so we have somewhere to plug in for our Android tablet to stay charged. That is being operated with our 1-gauge. We have the complete 1-gauge system, which is a little bit of, stuff to wire in, nothing crazy. And then obviously we'll have a tail light in the back, regular stuff like that, brake light switch. We have our oil pressure sensor and temperature sensor that we got to get installed in the bike and then route those wires. So it's a relatively complex wiring system compared to like what you would have on a real stripped down bobber. Also under there we're going to have our voltage regulator and also our ICM for our ignition control. That I don't have yet. We're still missing a parts bin for this bike, so I went ahead and bought another one, and then we'll find the other one eventually one day. I'm sure it'll turn up. But anyway, so it's a good bit of wiring. I may end up breaking this into a 2-part video if it goes too long, because like I said, I just want to get as much detail as I can for everyone who, is hesitant to wire a bike. I see a lot of guys, they want to take like the stock harness and chop it up to slim it down, and to me, the time you spend doing that, you could basically just wire the bike correctly. It'll be a lot cleaner, and then if you ever have a problem, you have a nice new harness you built yourself that helps you find your problem a lot easier than trying to go back through a stock harness that you chopped up. So I'm hopefully this will give some guys the encouragement or a little bit of knowledge to make them feel comfortable to try and do a scratch wiring job. So anyway, I'm gonna quit rambling and start getting my stuff laid out and then get to work. Alright, so first things first, you can see here we have our main harness. Maybe you can't see. There you go. From our front that we talked about in the previous video. That's running here. So what I'm going to do is continue on getting all the wires from the motor running up back to our under seat area. So first thing on that agenda is the stator. Stator's very simple on these. It's permanent magnet, 3-phase system. You got 3 yellow wires. Some bikes have white wires, but this particular one has 3 yellow wires. The wires do not matter. All 3 basically do the same thing, so you don't have to worry about where they hook on the other end. So we're going to take those 3 wires. We got a piece of 16 gauge marine grade, also in yellow, that we're going to match up to extend those back onto the seat. I use all marine grade wiring stuff wherever possible. I buy most of it from a company down here. They're semi-local to us, Sherco. I'll put a link in the description down there for you guys. They carry a tremendous amount of wiring stuff. Really good company. They ship all over the place. They sell on eBay and Amazon and all that, but you can go direct to them, and I'm sure it probably saves them a few bucks by not having to pay eBay and Amazon fees if you buy direct from their website. So I'll link that down in the description so you can see where we get all our stuff. If you haven't ever used one of these Milwaukee soldering irons, they're pretty impressive for a battery soldering iron, I will say that too. Pretty much what we've gone to exclusively these days. You get the bigger size battery, it lasts really well, and just works out great. Super handy, not having any cords in your way. Alright, so once we get our wires all soldered and heat shrink wrapped, then we're going to install our loom. So I use this, what do they call this stuff? Expandable sleeving. So it's a little bit of a pain in the ass to install. It's kind of like a Chinese finger trap, if you remember from when you were a kid. But it gives the cleanest look, and so to me it's worth the effort. And once you get it figured out, it's not too bad to install. You get it started on the end, and then it's kind of like a push and pull, and it slides down. Comes in all different sizes. This is actually probably a touch too small for 3 wires, but it was what I grabbed, so I'm using it. You can kind of tell it's a little too small because you can see the yellow wires in the expanded mesh because it's expanded out kind of wide. So, but it's no big deal. It doesn't really bother me too much, so I'm just going to use this piece, and I'll find the bigger roll if we get into any more quantity of wire in each loom. And once you get your end out, you kind of just bunch it up and push it down, and it'll go on down over the whole thing. And you pull it back out tight. Then I like to take a piece of heat shrink and slide it all the way down just to lock the end in. Alright, so we got that, and then we'll just decide where we want to route this, which I'm going to slip it up through this motor mount here in the back, pull it all the way through, and let it catch into where our other harness is running right here, so we can just zip tie these together. That's ours. Pull it right up the back of the motor, try and keep it, you know, as hidden as possible. I didn't go crazy on hiding all the wiring, being that this is really kind of a drag bike inspired build. It just doesn't make sense, because you wouldn't ever hide all that stuff on an actual race bike, because you want to be able to have access to things if you have a problem. So you would never like run the wiring inside the frame like we would on a custom chopper. So that was my thought process there, just trying to have it be a you know, good representation of an accurate, you know, kind of pro street bike build. So we've got that done. That is, so on this side of the motor now, all we've got left is the wiring for the two sensors. So we've got our oil pressure sender that we got installed last week here, and in the radiator here we are going to install the temperature sensor. So we'll get those two sensors, well, this sensor's in, I got to get the temperature sensor put in, and then we'll figure out the wiring for those so that we have kind of all the wiring off this side of the bike in the bike and run back to the area we want it. 3 wires terminated, fit to the bike. And then you got the other 2 wires, which are a ground wire and your positive charge wire, so that will run directly to either the battery or the starter solenoid where the battery cable hooks up. Just depends on which one will be a cleaner route. It's basically the same thing either way as far as hooking it up. So okay, so this is going to be our little main power station. It's got the relay for 4 outputs, so that's going to get direct battery juice, and then the signal wire from the on-off switch. Which will trigger the entire bike to turn on. And it routes all the power through the relay as opposed to running it through the switch, which, if you remember from one of our previous videos, is a little tiny micro switch that doesn't have the correct amp load capacity needed to just run the bike through the switch like we do on some stuff. So these will get a couple ring connectors on the 2. You got a power and ground, and then this will get tied to the output wire from our switch, which is in this harness here. Alright, so we got our ring terminals there. Those will end up, we'll get this tucked down in here, and these will get hooked to the battery here and there. And then we'll have our trigger wire to get everything powered up. So this is all the wires from our front harness that we did a couple of weeks ago. These all are labeled with our heat shrink label printer. If you didn't catch that video, check it out. Pretty cool, informative video on a nice tool that really helps you with wiring. So we got our headlight wire, we got a ground, and then we got our 3 coil wires. So those are going to end up, I'll separate the coil wires off because those are going to go with the ECM or the ICM rather, when it arrives. And the headlight wire and ground are going to run to our little relay box as one of the outputs, and we'll have a fused output then. So these are really easy to install. They have a screw terminal on here. So what I like to do for a screw terminal, I just strip a little bit of wire back, and then I put a little solder on the end of the wire just to give something a little more firm than the wire for the screw to bite on when you screw it down. Probably not 100% necessary, but it's just something I like to do. Let's see if I can get a good shot of this for you. Yeah. So here you can see our surface mount relay, and then we have 4 fused outputs on this box. It's a little bit more complicated than how I normally do them, but with running the little micro switches and stuff, it just was kind of our best option. It's fine. Alright, so there we go. We got our headlight wire terminated into our fuse box. Alright, next wires we can terminate off is our 1 gauge main power and ground feed. So we're going to go ahead and get these hooked up to one of our fused outputs. Alright, we got our 1 gauge terminated off here. Second input, or secondary input on our fuse box. And we're just plugging away at all these little wires. I'm not going to show you guys every single connection. I mean, it's basically, I think you get the idea. You run your wires to where they need to go, and then you terminate your connections. The ICM is a little bit tricky sometimes for people to figure out. Obviously, I don't have that here today, so that's going to have to come next week in part 2 of this video. So we're going to go ahead and just keep plugging away on all our little connections, and then I'll get back on and show you guys kind of a little flyover once all the connections are made. Alright, so we got just about everything buttoned up that we can here. We got our tail light wiring harness ran to the back. This is our ignition wires. We got our brake light switch wires, which are going to go here on a banjo bolt brake light switch. So until we get our ignition box, we're just about set on what we can do with the wiring. So again, I don't know how good this was information wise for you guys that are intimidated by wiring, but hopefully it'll help somebody out. Alright guys, that's going to do it for today. Hope we help somebody out with some wiring information, and maybe help you guys get over the hump of trying to start wiring your bike. That is it. Hopefully we'll have our ICM this week, and next week we can get all the wiring buttoned up in this thing. I think that's the last piece we're waiting for wiring wise, and we'll be able to power up the system and see how everything works. So that's going to do it from here. We hope to see you guys next time at Gaddy's Garage.